welcome to Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod, Living the Dream, a show that celebrates ordinary people who do extraordinary things. Hear what motivated them to attain their goals, see which circumstances molded their characters and turned them into everyday heroes. Learn more about this show and the hosts for Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod TV and radio on Facebook. Now here are your hosts, the Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod, KathleenO'KeefeKanavos and Lori Boyle.
Welcome to Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod. We have a great guest for you today. And I am the Wicked Housewife of Cape Cod, KathleenO'KeefeKanavos, but my friends call me Kat. And at the other end of the table is Lori Boyle, the other Wicked Housewife on Cape Cod. And we have Kevin Symmons with us today as our guest. And Lori's going to tell you a little bit about Kevin because he is an amazing person.
He certainly is.
Thank you.
Kevin Symmons is a best-selling novelist and college faculty member. He served 4 terms as a president as one of the Northeast's most respected writing organizations. His 2012 paranormal novel, Rite of Passage, won a Rom-Com Reader's Crown Award finalist and was an Amazon bestseller. His 2013 release, Out of the Storm, is a contemporary romantic thriller set on Cape Cod. It has gathered dozens of 5-star reviews and hit number 6 on Amazon.com and has been selected for Amazon's Elite Encore program. His 2014 novel, Solo, is a literate women's fiction work already gathering critical acclaim. His new release from New York's award-winning Wild Rose Press is a tense romantic thriller titled Chrysalis, set on Buzzards Bay near his Cape Cod home. It will be released this summer. Kevin collaborated with an award-winning Boston screenwriter in adapting one of his story ideas for the screen. He is a sought-after lecturer and public speaker who has appeared across New England. And we are so happy to have you today as our guest. Thanks,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Lori, and thank you, Kat.
Oh, you're so welcome.
It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm glad we were able to connect and met each other at a Writers Center event about a month ago, because I've known Kat for a long time, followed her success, but it's very nice to meet you, Lori. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great.
So Kevin, I've got to ask you, are all of your books set here in Cape Cod? Is that basically your setting?
You know, that's a great question, Kat. Actually, 2 of them are directly set on Cape Cod. Out of the Storm, I think that's right there. And yeah, Out of the Storm, and Chrysalis is, no, that's Chrysalis there, the latest book, I'm sorry. That's set in Buzzards Bay. The other 2 are set in New England and do have some Cape Cod in them. You know, Solo has some scenes on Cape Cod, though it's set in Boston. And actually the first one, the debut novel, Rite of Passage, is actually set up in Maine, on Lake Sebago, and it is a romantic Wiccan thriller. And
cool.
Yeah, and eventually it takes place right after World War II, and eventually the hero and heroine actually migrate across the Atlantic and end up in Wales, which is my homeland, I might add, my family's homeland. So that's, but yes, all of them have somewhat of a Cape Cod background. Thank you.
Oh, I love
That's
that.
cool, Lori.
So is writing something you've always wanted to do, because it hasn't been your career your whole life?
No, that's a great question also. I wrote my first short story when I was 11 years old, and I think probably every writer that you meet probably says something like that, every successful writer like yourself. But when I went to college, I was fascinated by music. I came from a musical family, all of whom had much more talent than I did. And I ended up, because of getting married and the military and a variety of other things, I ended up getting my Bachelor of Science degree at Northeastern back in the 70s. And I ended up going in the service for a while. And then I ended up going on to get an MBA, and I actually ended up running a manufacturing company, and because I had a lovely wife and 3 children, the writing thing ended up getting put aside. Though I always did swear, joked with my wife, I said, someday I'm going to write the great American novel. And her answer was, it's already been done, don't worry about it.
That's a good one.
You know, I've always said, sometimes when it comes to writing, rather than choosing our career can be like kittens, they can choose us. And I know that I never wanted to be a writer. If somebody had said to me in grade school, you're going to be a writer, you're going to have books, you're going to be published, I would have said, yeah, you're crazy. But here we are. Sometimes we have to do what the path that is built for us. We have to walk that path, and gosh, writing is so amazing. You meet so many wonderful people like you, and
you too.
So where do your stories come from, though? We know that your settings are basically New England or Cape Cod, but where did the nexus for your stories come from?
I don't sit down and develop a 20-page outline and every bullet point and plot point. I sort of come up with an idea to start with, and I let it sort of carry me. One of the great lines I heard about plot development and character was a very successful New England writer named Kate Flores, who I took several classes from off Cape, and she said, she came in one day and she was doing a class on character, and she said, she said, I will tell you, she said, last night I had it. I went out in the car, I brought a bottle of wine, I took the top off, and my heroine and I went for a drive. We had to get things straight. I generally will write the first chapter, and one of my mentors, Joanne Ferguson, who I alluded to in some of the stuff I've sent to you, who was taught at Brown, who was the president of Romance Writers of America, said, you want to get the first 10 pages right, because that's what sells this book. You want to get the last 5 pages perfect, because that's what's going to sell your next book. So exactly,
that's
I
really
do
good.
exactly the same thing, Kat. I write the first scene, if you want to call it that, the hook, to get people in, and then I write the ending, so I know at least where I'm going.
Yeah, exactly.
How I get there, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we can wander around, put the top down in the car and drive around, but we know we're going to end up, and that's what matters.
As an unsuccessful writer myself,
I doubt that.
Let me tell you.
She's doing great. Don't listen to her.
Kat's making me write. That's
Very
what's
good.
happening. Kat's making me write, and she said, I want you to write a blog. And I said, what's a blog? And then she said, no, just write 500 words. I go, that's a lot of words. I'm not that good at this.
She's a left brain writer.
I'll come up with 25 or 30 and tell you, exactly what you need to know. But no, I have to, you have to build it out a little bit. That's my problem. I have to keep building it out, and I get to it and I go, Kat, what do you think? She's like, yeah, it's terrible. Let's do this. But this helps me.
It's a great skeleton. We just have to put some clothes on it.
Right. That's what it is.
Great
the
skeleton.
Well
I do
put,
the
yeah,
skeleton,
that's great.
and then. But I also have a magazine column that I'm struggling with too. So this is really good information for someone who doesn't write. I guess I write a lot. I was telling her husband the other day that
Peter,
Peter. I've never even written a paper in college because I was like a math and science major.
Oh, okay. You're one of those.
I didn't do papers. So this is really great. But tell us about Chrysalis, because this is your brand new book.
Yes.
So what's this about?
Chrysalis, it is set in Mattapoisett, on a absolutely beautiful 12-acre estate.
And where is Mattapoisett?
Mattapoisett is on Buzzards Bay, facing over towards Rhode Island and what we call the South Coast in Massachusetts.
It's over the bridge.
Right, exactly right, exactly right. And in my books, my heroines sort of always start about here and end up here. My heroes, much more static. Heroes sort of start out, they're all, as in this book, my hero is a rock star status. He's an all Ivy League baseball and football player. He was class valedictorian at a private school. He's handsome, yada, 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 and so on and so forth. The heroine, Paige, is, again, when we dress her up and clean her up, she is gorgeous, but of course, she's given up on life. Her first love has deserted her. She had a very serious, somewhat mysterious riding accident that could have cost her life. So she's very much down on herself. The boy who comes, Morgan, who comes to visit her, she's been secretly in love with since they first met, as 11-year-olds. And she knows, the very first paragraph of the book, she knows he is going to absolutely look right through her, see her beautiful sister and all the other people that are coming to this reunion. And of course he doesn't. His line is, he said, I've spent my whole life surrounded by prom queens and cheerleaders. What I want is someone who I can relate to. And Paige is the person he can relate to. But it is more than just a romantic thriller. There are two other critical characters. One is, both are ex-convicts. One is seeking redemption, and I can't give away too much there. He's seeking to reconnect with the son he had to give up when he was sent to prison. The other one is seeking brutal revenge because he was wrongly convicted and he has been pardoned, but he wants to get back at the people who made his life in prison miserable, and more so, the district attorney who made his career on sending him to prison.
Oh, wow.
Goodness.
And it
That-
also I'm sorry, go ahead, Ken.
No, that's very heavy in these books. But you know, I've got to ask you, how is it that you, as a man, are able to get into the lives and the minds of these women? How are you doing that?
I can't really tell you. I'm not
You mean
sure.
you won't tell us?
No, I'm not really sure.
Do you find it challenging at all?
I do find it challenging. Obviously, and for instance, when I'll do a first draft, show it to my wife, which is always a mistake because she's I don't know about Peter and you and Peter, but she's my worst critic, and she will say, no 17-year-old girl would say that or do that. So you're right. I have to go through several iterations before I kind of get, my publicist looks it over, and I have some beta readers who look it over. When I had a critique group, they would look it over and go through the same thing. Say, no. Nobody 17 or 20 or whatever is going to say that I do that. So yes, it is an exercise in trying to get the characters exactly right. The final point of Chrysalis is it is also set it starts in June of 2001, and it's set over the summer of 9/11. So we know what happens, and that plays into the story as well.
Oh, great.
It's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. Now that you've created all these characters, though, in your
They're
book,
in my head all the time.
they're in your head all the time. But then when you finish your
They talk
book,
to you all
and
the
you
time.
you have to put them away. Is that hard?
Very, very hard. Especially some of the first two, it wasn't as hard because I was still high, if you will, on the idea of getting a book published and selling a few books, and especially Out of the Storm, as you alluded to, had experienced some decent success, and that was kind of fun. But these two really, and I would say you evolve as a writer.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I can see a difference. That's not to demean any of the first two books; they were successful, but I think my characters weren't as multi-layered and as complex as they have been in Solo and Chrysalis, especially. So yes, it is, especially Chrysalis. And I have to relate the story. My 17-year-old heroine, I will tell you, when I was a freshman in college, I was certainly no rock star like my hero, but when I was a freshman in college, I did have a 17-year-old equestrian who wore braces and glasses like my heroine does at the outside of the book, and I was madly in love with her. So it was really hard to put away Paige, I will tell you right now.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense. So you kind of, you use that information, and that's great.
Exactly. Thank you.
And that would make sense. So take us a little bit on your publishing journey for those who are watching and are going, but I had this great book and I wrote it. There's no way I'm going to get published. Believe me, we said the same thing.
Absolutely right.
So tell us about your journey.
Oh boy. Well, I started probably probably been doing this, when we met, I've been doing this for a dozen years now. I had the good fortune, I'm very old and tired, admittedly, but I had the good fortune, without going into detail, we had a great business that I worked in, but I actually got to the point where the business had grown enough, I had the ability to get out of it fairly early, and it wasn't doing it for me anymore, and that sounds very egotistical. I don't mean it that way, but I was spending more time in budget meetings, and my wife was sick. I was traveling an awful lot, selling, and so finally I negotiated with the people who owned the business and said, "Look, would you really mind if I got out of it?" And they said, "No, we'd like you to stay, but no." And so that worked out fine. As it ended up, they took out, if you will, 15 other people who had been partial owners of the business. So what happened was, and I'll spare you the in-between time, somewhere along the way I actually hurt, I was gonna break 80 at golf, I was gonna ski the Alps, and 10 days after I left my business, I fractured a disc in my back.
Oh, no.
So that really wasn't gonna happen. I did get better, and I mobile, and I ran again, and I played golf again, but I just wasn't gonna have the athletic ability that I may have had at one time. So my wife, one day when I was popping a Vicodin in a Flexeril, and I was sitting on the Cape looking out at the beautiful view, she said, "I'm sick of you feeling sorry for yourself." She said, "Why don't you," she threw my old Toshiba laptop in, she said, you once joked about writing a great American novel." She said, "Go to it. Well, of course, I didn't write the great American novel. I started writing, believe it or not, for those who maybe are as old as I am, can remember things like Dallas and Captains and the Kings and a few of those like TV anthologies. I started writing a business fiction book. And I gave it to friends, and I gave it to my family, and to use an expression from theater, they said, this closes out of town. This is just not going to make it. So I abandoned that, and then I started writing a book, which I would call again, women's fiction, contemporary romance about the Cape. And it was called When Summer Ends. It's the one you referred to earlier that has been written into a screenplay by a gentleman that I met, Barry Brodsky, who was at one of the early conferences I went to. And it got a little bit more play. People liked it. I was able to find an agent, and she got it inside a couple of small publishing houses. It has yet seen the business side of a printing press, but you go on. You know how it is. You write a book, you write another book. And so I went to a major conference. This is now probably 3 or 4 years, and I was submitting to every publisher, every agent, as I'm sure you've gone through, every editor I could possibly find. And sometimes it really seemed like, especially when we were now into the era of email, it seemed like I was getting the rejection before I even sent the submission. But
we know it's coming now.
Yeah, exactly right. It's kind of like I said, if I hit send, and then it was like, boop, sorry, not plans, you know. So finally, after doing this for about 4.5 or 5 years, I found, and
4.5 or 5?
5 years.
Oh,
So don't despair, folks.
Yeah, don't give up.
Absolutely. I found a small publisher, a small press in New York that I had submitted to several ideas to.
So you submitted through email again?
Yes,
okay.
Email. Yep. And I said that dates me if you want to. I actually was of the ilk or the genre that actually, when we first started submitting, it had to be hard copy, and you had to send it out to an agent. But we had gotten evolved to the era of email, and I'd go to conferences, and I would pitch, and so on and so forth. Well, I finally submitted this book, Rite of Passage, in its original form to the Wild Rose Press, and it went through the publisher, it went to the head editor of a certain imprint, and then it got to a young woman named Sarah Hansen. And everything is virtual. She lived in Pinckney, Michigan, and she wrote me back. She said, I like your story, Kevin, but she said, you'd have to do a lot of work on it, and here's what I'd want you to do. And she said, I'm sure you don't want to do that. I said, you want to bet? I do want to do it.
Yeah, there you go.
That was probably, I did a rework. I submitted it back to her. I resubmitted it in June. I got a good feeling when she friended me on Facebook in August, and I had almost given up. I was, believe it or not, traveling with my wife and friends in Europe. I remember the date, September 27th, 2000, was it 10 or 11? I remember the date. And I had actually had my BlackBerry geared towards so it could get international mail. And the Friday night we were coming home, I was in Frankfurt, Germany, I got an email, and it said, I want a contract Rite of Passage.
Wow.
I went downstairs and bought everybody a round of drinks.
Great.
And of course, it still wasn't that easy. There were things we had to do, but anyway, it was.
So it was like
Wow,
almost
that's
a year from beginning, from the time you hit send until the time you signed that contract. It was almost a year.
Absolutely.
And people think, oh, it's been 3 weeks. 3 weeks is nothing. I've had them say to me, I sent it off 3 weeks ago and I haven't heard anything. I'm like, well, let me know in 3 months.
Yeah, exactly.
6 months maybe.
Right. Right, and of course you've been through this, Kat, and again, without boring people with all the details, we always tell people at
They love the details.
Yeah, I know. At the Writers Center, there's nothing wrong with 3 months into a submission politely saying, "Gee, Harriet, did you receive my submission?" Because a lot of times, frankly, though most of them are pretty good, a lot of times they won't even acknowledge the fact they received your submission. So I went through that. I'm sure you went through it. And once I got that published. And it was almost a year after that till it came out in print. The first weekend, and I think we all go through that, believe it or not, actually, thanks to the Cape Cod Writers Center, friends, relatives, whatever, believe it or not, actually, had a high ranking on Amazon the very first weekend. And then it kind of petered off, as it would, because I had no more friends and relatives. And actually, they actually helped me. We talked about this before we went on the air. Social media, went on Facebook, have a bunch of fans now. Went on Twitter, had a great website established, and so it sort of took off. And did some radio, did some TV, and got my name in the paper a few times. And the next one, Out of the Storm, was, believe it or not, which has been the most successful, was almost like a filler book. It was like, they said, well, gee, this was pretty good. Why don't you write something else? And I said, okay, well, how about a contemporary thriller? And I had that idea, the idea of a man down on his luck, depressed, lost his wife, who had come home to find the perfect life, and he's disappointed. And so what happens when something very strange takes place? And the tagline I used on that book was Ashley the dream he'd prayed for, or the nightmare he couldn't escape? And I love taglines. So I wrote that one, and that was success. So, and I think you'd probably attest, once you kind of get inside the publishing, venue, they refer to it as sort of make it inside the garden, or the publishing garden, it's a little bit easier.
It is. It does get a little bit easier.
It does.
It's you've been vetted.
Exactly. Good.
So
Great word. Right.
They trust what you're going to send them. So your this book that you're talking about here, Out of the Storm, was a kind of a what if book.
Yes. Right.
And what if is powerful.
Right.
So Lori, sometimes people when they're reading books, they don't realize how long it took that author to really write and get that book published. Writing it is only the beginning, the very beginning. And fortunately today, as we were talking about, social media opens up a lot of doors for you, and you can use that avenue to get yourself seen, because a publisher almost has to fall in love with you before they're going to fall in love with your book. They have to see that they can depend on you, because there's, I remember my agent, Jack Scoville, saying the publishing industry is not into publishing books. They're into making money.
Absolutely.
So they need to know that you are dependable and your book is going to make money. And it sounds like there would be gazillions of people like that, but there really aren't.
No.
And they don't want to take a chance. So once you're into the industry and they see that you are dependable, makes a whole big difference.
That's so well put. And the first thing they teach you is writing is a business. It's not an ego trip. Right. It's not to tell your great grandmother's story. If you want to do that, that's fine. But if that's all you want to do, then maybe your future in writing isn't what you may think it is. And what would you say? I've heard different percentages, but anywhere between 25 and 40% is writing the book, and the rest of it is publicizing yourself. And going back to your point, my publisher, in the contract, it says you will have a presence, you will have a Facebook author page, you will have a timeline, you will be on Twitter, you will have an author page on Amazon, you will be on Goodreads, and so on and so forth and so on and so forth. You will have a workable website which you update on a regular basis. Now, does the publisher actually go and check those things? No. But having worked on websites at one time, we used to tell people, if you haven't updated your website once a week, don't even have it.
And that's where blog comes in. You
Absolutely.
can always update your website with a blog.
Absolutely.
And, Lori and I also have the radio show, Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod Radio. And so we're able to take that show and blog it. And of course, we're going to have Kevin on our show. We have to.
Thank you.
That's right.
And blog it, and then you give the show, this TV show is going to go to Kevin. The radio show goes to Kevin. He puts it on his website blog. And you have an updated website. So Lori and I teach courses on that.
That's right.
Kevin, tell us a little bit about the Writers' Conference that's coming up here on Cape Cod. It's here every year. It's big.
Absolutely.
And wonderful.
It is. As we started out there, right? Exactly.
Party time.
That's right. The conference is now in its 53rd year. The organization is the Cape Cod Writers Center. Information you can get from at capecodwriterscenter.org. It is a non-for-profit, 501c3. This year they have some wonderful people. Marge Percy, Claire Cook, who wrote Must Love Dogs, made a movie out of it. They are keynote people. I'm going to brag because my publisher, Rhonda Penders, is coming from New York. I'm going to speak on Saturday at noontime to everybody. I don't know if I should say she's going to take submissions. She may not, but
you never know.
Absolutely, there's a lot of wonderful people, and this is not so people understand. Even though it is on Cape Cod, I don't want people to think there's any provincialism about it. There is absolutely not. Even though there are a lot of wonderful Cape Cod people, we have had, I say we because at one time I was the president of the organization, we've had people from Canada, we've had people from Australia, we've had people from England, and at different times. And I think 3 years ago, we shifted the location of the conference to a place called the Hyannis Resort and Conference Center, which is wonderful, beautiful location right near the Melody Tent. If you want to also hear, you know, Chris Bodie or, you know,
Go listen to some music.
oh, absolutely right, yeah. Adam Lambert was there, I think one of the years we were there. But the thing about it is, 3 years ago, this conference was evaluated and voted one of the top 5 in America by Writer Magazine.
Wow.
So it is not a mom and pop, just a mom and pop operation. It's very, we or they now, I should say, usually have somewhere in the neighborhood of 300 attendees, 30 faculty. Classes are generally not more than 8 to 10 people.
Yeah, which
and
is
there
nice.
are some lecture classes. They not only teach you how to write with specifics, character and plotting and all that
Right.
thing, they teach you how to sell. To the
Yeah,
point
that's
where they
important.
actually will do pitch sessions and they will evaluate and talk to you about what you're doing wrong. So I think that's the other thing. It is both a craft and a business
It is a business,
event.
Jim.
Yeah.
And the Writers' Conference, Lori, it's really a destination Writers' Conference.
Right.
This place is so beautiful.
Yeah, it is. It is. And that's August 6th to 9
Right.
this summer, 2015.
Right.
Now, I went to that writers' conference with you. Kat invited me. Kat and Peter invited me, and I thought, what am I doing at the writers' conference? But they said this big cocktail party. I said, I'm there.
Yeah,
You know?
party on.
I mean,
Party on, party.
and what I didn't realize was that so many people that I met, they're already published authors. And a lot of those people were members of the Cape Cod Writers Group that
Right.
meet every month on
Right,
Cape Cod.
right.
And so many of them are very successful authors that
And
are
they'll help
published.
you.
And they
Absolutely.
will help you. They are so kind, they're so nice. And they break out into different groups during the
Right,
month.
right.
You know, if you're going to write your memoir, you're going to write science fiction, or you're going to write romance, they have a group for each one of those. And
Absolutely.
they're very helpful and very kind.
Thank you,
They,
that's
yeah,
right.
they're really, really wonderful. And so is the writers group. I also went to the keynote, and that was really interesting too. And I, you know, like I don't really write. I'm trying, but
You'll get
She's
there.
doing it
We're gonna
now.
we're gonna make a writer
I'm
of
a
you, Laurie.
reluctant writer.
Tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. I don't know.
The Reluctant Writer, now
Yeah.
that sounds
I
like
like
a great
that. That's
book.
a,
Yeah.
absolutely
Okay.
right. The Reluctant Writer. But no, that's a great point. Yes, they helped a lot of people evolve into successful writers.
But that's a Yankee thing too. We don't pull any punches.
Nope.
We kind of just tell it like it is.
Absolutely right.
And that's,
Absolutely
you
right.
ask my opinion, I hope you really want it. Right?
Absolutely right. That's absolutely true.
And the biggest question we often have to ask ourselves when we're writing is, am I writing this for me, or am I writing this for you?
Right.
If I'm writing it
Yeah.
for you, I need to get a lot of me out of it.
Absolutely right.
And that's hard because, you know, I'm writing it. I'm kind of there. But God, this has been a great session with you, Kevin.
Oh,
We
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
enjoyed every second, and we hope you guys will join us again when we do another session of Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod. And you can find us on Facebook at Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod, and our website, wickedhousewivesonCapeCod.com. We have all of our TV shows, we have all of our radio shows, we have a lot of our events that we're doing there, so come and join us. Be part of the family. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kat.
You're
Thanks.
so welcome.
Great. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Thank you. It was wonderful.
You're welcome. Thanks for watching.
Thank you for joining Lori Boyle and Kathleen O'KeefeKanavos on Wicked Housewives on Cape Cod. Don't forget to like us on Facebook for our show updates, and join us next time when we showcase more everyday heroes.